Washington State? Oh, nice. We're from Wisconsin. Oh, Wisconsin's gorgeous. I bet Washington is too. It is. It is. Would anyone like the fan on, or is everyone good temperature? Okay, perfect. So again, thank you all for booking this tour. The ticket sales go directly to the care of the sea turtles. So the Cairns Turtle Rehabilitation Center is a nonprofit. The Cairns Aquarium donates their space to the nonprofit and helps raise information or raise money and shares knowledge about sea turtles through these tours. So thank you all for coming. The Cairns Turtle Rehabilitation Center was started in 2000 by Jean Gilbert, who's pictured here. She's a Cairns resident, and she, was looking around and seeing sea turtles wash out sick and injured, and she thought, well, what can I do about this? And she formed the Cairns Turtle Rehabilitation Center in partnership with the aquarium that was present here in Cairns at the time. It really was just some buckets of water in the back of this aquarium, trying to make the lives better for the sea turtles that came in. I'm sure 26 years later, she never could imagine that it's become as big an institution as it is. There are 3 facilities in Cairns. The largest one is at Fitzroy Island. There is also some space at James Cook University, and of course here at the Cairns Aquarium. This slide is a little out of date. They've rescued over 680 individual sea turtles over the last 26 years from 6 different species of sea turtle. And the whole thing, it is pretty cool, I would agree. And the whole thing is volunteer run, so pretty incredible. Now, there are 7 species of sea turtle in the world, and 6 of the world's 7 are found here in Australia. Unfortunately, all of them are listed under the International Union for the Conservation of Nature's Endangered Species List. The red list is maybe how you've heard it. And they're all classified as vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered. Now, what do those words mean? Well, to be endangered, we're talking just 20% of your population is left in the wild. When we say critically endangered, we're talking 10%. So these labels aren't just willy-nilly classifications. They're urgent flags saying that these animals, we risk losing these species forever. So it's really important that we pay attention to them and we understand how we are impacting them and how we can assist these animals in recovery so that we continue to share this planet with them. Now we're going to go into each species that's found here in Australia, and we're going to start with the green sea turtle. Now, something you should know about biologists is we're not particularly clever when it comes to naming things. So the names really do describe the animal. So the green sea turtle is excellent, excellent. So these guys actually eat so much algae and seagrass that their flesh is green, like their muscles are green from all the algae and seagrass they eat. These guys are listed as endangered, and how I mentioned that every single species is on that IUCN list. Well, I lied to you. Last month, the green sea turtle was taken off the endangered species list, which means their numbers have recovered, the population is stable, and this is something that is really exciting, and it shows that the conservation measures that we're taking are working, and I think that's something we should all be very proud of, because I think when it comes to conservation, we all try to help the environment, but we don't necessarily see the impact that it's having on the natural world. So this is really wonderful evidence showing that that the initiatives we're taking really do help. So that's pretty exciting. Hawksbill sea turtle. This one's called that because their bill really does look like that of a hawk. It's fine and pointed, and this has to do with what these guys eat. So they like to eat sponges, which are venomous, and the venom in the sponges that they eat actually is what gives them these beautiful, bright, mottled coloration in their carapace or their shell. Now these guys are listed as critically endangered, so just 10% of their population is left in the wild. And part of the reason why they're critically endangered is they face all the other threats that other sea turtle species face. but they face an additional pressure due to hunting. They tend to be poached for their carapace because it's so beautiful. Maybe you're familiar with the tortoiseshell pattern on glasses, jewelry, hair, decorations, things like that. At one point they were made from the sea turtle's carapace, and sometimes they are occasionally still poached for their carapace to make jewelry. The olive ridley sea turtle, it's called that because its shell is more of an olive green color. They're born more of a gray color. And they're also known for having the most number of scoots on their carapace. And the scoot is essentially the different sections in the carapace. These guys are listed as vulnerable. The flatback sea turtle, so do we have any Australians with us today? A couple? Excellent. Well, this species here is found exclusively in Australia. It's endemic to the continent. And like the name suggests, it has a flat, sloping back. And these guys are listed as vulnerable. Now, the loggerhead sea turtle is really called that because people think its head looks like a log. And their jaw really is big and beefy and strong. And it has to do with what they're eating. So they eat crabs, conches, things with hard exoskeletons. And they need the extra muscle in their jaw to break the shells of the food they eat. The next animal, this one is my favorite sea turtle species, is the leatherback. It is the second largest reptile on the planet, after the saltwater crocodile, which of course is also found here. They can weigh over 1,000 kilograms, this is a little out of date, and they can dive over a kilometer deep into the ocean, which is incredible. Now, a kilometer deep in the ocean, you're experiencing insane pressure at that depth. So how are these guys able to survive that? Well, it has to do with their carapace, their shell. It's modified to be more of a leathery feeling, and at deep depths, it actually is able to compress under that pressure, and it protects all their important organs at that depth, which is pretty incredible. The other amazing thing about this animal is its favorite food of all things is jellyfish. And jellyfish is just water with some electricity in it. I mean, there's not a lot there, right? But these giant animals, right? The second largest reptile on the planet, its favorite food is jellyfish. And their mouths are specially adapted to be able to eat these guys, and how they eat is really interesting. So they will smell and see the jellyfish swimming in the distance. They come up to them, and then once they start approaching them, they'll start sucking in the water, pulling in the jellyfish to them. And as they suck in all the jellyfish and all the water, obviously they have a whole bunch of water in their stomach, and they will expel all the water. So how do they expel the water if they're not expelling the jellyfish? Well, their mouth is specially adapted for this, and it's pretty startling. Ooh. So that's what the inside of their mouth looks like. I'm sure none of you were guessing this.
My gosh.
That's good, you shouldn't. So all these spikes, as you can imagine, are able to catch any of the jellyfish that are attempting to make an exit. Now, imagine now that, there are humans on your planet, and humans are producing this thing called plastic bags. Now, plastic bags, right, they look like a jellyfish, they move like a jellyfish, and as they start to slowly decompose in the water and algae starts to grow on them, they'll even smell like a jellyfish. So all the cues in the environment are telling this species that plastic bag is food. And so they go up and they try to eat the plastic bag. And maybe they realize it's food and maybe they don't. But by then, it's too late. When your mouth looks like this, a plastic bag can become a death trap. Now, the good news is, scientists and people who study sea turtles are starting to see a shift in the types of marine plastics and marine trash that we're finding in our sea turtle species. I'm sure many of us can remember a time when plastic bags and plastic straws were everywhere in our worlds. And maybe we don't enjoy those cardboard straws, but these guys are noticing the difference. Scientists are noticing the difference. And we're not seeing plastic bags and plastic straws in the digestive tracts of sea turtles that wind up dead on our shores. So that is a really good thing. And so it's a great example of how our changes don't impact our lives very much, but have a huge impact on these guys. Now, sea turtles, if humans weren't in the picture, climate change hasn't happened yet, 1 in every 1,000 baby sea turtles make it to adulthood. That's just, the circle of life, the cards they were dealt. And this is due to, being tasty little snacks to other animals, disease, natural disasters, things like that. Things that, any animal faces. But unfortunately, humans, or I shouldn't say unfortunately, but the reality is that humans are part of this world. We are, parts of these ecosystems. We're mammals, but, we all have to remember that. And so our actions are having a profound impact on these guys. And because of this, sea turtle survival rate has dropped from every 1 in every 1,000 baby sea turtles making it to adulthood to 1 in every 2,000 baby sea turtles making it to adulthood. And while we're not noticing the impacts maybe right now from this aspect, we certainly will down the line when the older generations move on and the next generation comes to take their place. We simply might not have the numbers to continue on with the species. A really big issue for baby sea turtles in particular is climate change. It's a really big issue, and this has to do with the sex determination that these sea turtles are. The sex determination of baby sea turtles is determined by the temperature that they're exposed to while they're in the nest. So under normal conditions, you'll have the sand, right, and then you have the nest underneath the sand. The top half is warmer, that gives you your females. Bottom half is cooler, that gives you your males. So every nest, more or less, is a 50-50 split between boys and girls. Obviously, with climate change, climate's getting warmer in particular, we're seeing a shift from 50-50 split to 75% female, 25% male. And if climate change continues down the path that it is, there's the opportunity that we could have 100% female nests. And with this will come increasing birth defects, eggs not hatching, things like that. It is inevitably a death sentence for many of these species. Now humans, right, we think we're pretty clever, and sometimes we are and sometimes we aren't, but we thought, well, surely we can fix this. What if we take all the eggs, bring them in the lab, and we determine the sex ratio of every single nest, make them all 50-50 split? What we realized is that doesn't work either, and it's because when we release the sea turtles, they don't know where their nesting grounds are. So the way sea turtles navigate the world is through using the magnetic fields of the Earth's surface. And what they do is they come out of the nest, right, and they make this 500-meter dash towards the ocean. And when they make that 500-meter dash, they lock in their location on the planet, and they lock in their location for where they were born. Now this doesn't matter so much for males because they never come back to land. They spend the rest of their lives swimming. But the females, they come back to land to lay their eggs. And specifically, they come back to the beaches where they were hatched to lay their eggs because they know that that beach is safe, that it successfully produced them, so surely it could successfully produce their babies. If they don't make that 500-meter dash, it becomes a guessing game. They pull their heavy bodies up onto the shore, and maybe the rocks are the wrong size. Maybe there are predators that are going to eat all those eggs. Maybe there's people or whatever. There's too much pollution on this beach. Maybe she gets stressed out, and she'll either pretend to live, or she'll check out the beach and stuff, and maybe it's not the right fit. She'll go back into the ocean. She'll pull herself up onto another beach. Maybe that's not right. Pull herself back into the ocean. So this is very energy intensive for this mother sea turtle. We risk her losing her eggs. We risk her, laying the eggs in a nest, and that nest just not being the right fit. And maybe something comes and lays up all her babies. And so it's really important for the continuation of these species long term that they not only lay the eggs where they have been laying eggs for generations, but that those eggs hatch there so that they can continue to lay eggs for the future. Now I want to talk about some of the diseases that sea turtles face, and these are naturally occurring in these species. Fibrocapillomatosis is a common one we see. It's the production of tumors, both externally and internally in these species, and can cause blockages, disrupt digestive problems, or cause digestive problems, things like that. Jenny Gilbert actually helped develop a vaccine for this disease, and of all things, it comes from a horse vaccine. So we took this vaccine from a mammal, and we're able to adjust it for a reptile, which I think is pretty crazy and a pretty cool feat. Another common one we see is floater syndrome. Naturally, this is caused by pneumonia in sea turtles, and usually this will happen if they like come up to the surface too quickly, or they like get caught and fit. It happens with like the changing of the seasons, and them coming up and down in the water column. It can also be caused by humans, in which the animals get caught in fishing nets and things and brought up to the surface too quickly, and then they like partially wake up from their semi-comatose state, which they do when they sleep, and being thrown back in. And essentially floater syndrome causes the animals to float at the top of the water column, and they're unable to dive and forage for food, or they get sunburned, things like that. Now, human threats to marine turtles, and we talked about a couple of these. We talked about marine pollution, we talked the impacts of climate change, illegal hunting, briefly mentioned bycatch by commercial fisheries. Artificial lighting is a big one, particularly for baby sea turtles, as they tend to climb out of the nests at night. You see the moon reflecting on the water, and that's their cue to swim towards the water. Now with artificial lighting, it will confuse the babies, and they'll start heading in the wrong direction, towards houses, towards cars, towards dogs and cats, and that's not a good thing. Boat strikes, unfortunately, are another big issue, causing damage to the carapace or to their skulls, impact their flippers, things like that, and it's a major cause of floater syndrome, so them being stuck at the surface of the water. Now, like humans, they go through a triage process when they're actually picked up. Now, the good thing about being a sea turtle is they tend to have a good public image, and when people hear that there's a sick or injured sea turtle, they want to help it. I mean, in Cairns, sea turtles have been known to get free taxi rides, they get free plane rides, like the community does, find around these animals to look after them. And so they all know that the Turtle Rehabilitation Center is here, and they bring them to the center to rehab them and hopefully get them sent back out into the wild. Now, what sort of treatments can sea turtles experience? Well, they get vaccines, surgeries, antibiotics, fluids, dry docking, and that's what you're seeing here in this picture. Dry docking is when these animals are brought out of the water, and two very important things happen in order for the animal to be dry docked. So remember how I was talking about how heavy sea turtles are? Well, when they're taken out of the water, they become so heavy that if they're on something hard, they'll compress their organs. And so they have to be on something soft, like sand or nice cushion, to help protect their organs. And then they're also covered in something damp to prevent them from drying out. And this is what allows doctors to perform surgeries, provide vaccines, fluids, things like that. In this picture, you're seeing a fishing hook being removed. And while this animal doesn't seem lucky, it is a very lucky guy. So this dark part right here, that's a vein or an artery. So it got pretty close. And the other thing you'll notice is that this fishing hook got stuck in the neck of the animal. So if it had made it further in, it could have caused all sorts of internal damage. And they also wouldn't have been able to remove the fishing hook because the carapace, it covers the entire 360 outside of the animal. And so you can't drill in there and try to remove it. In these instances, usually what doctors try to do is they try to flush it through the animal because the fishing hook has to come out, and as you can imagine, that's a pretty big gamble to take, and it's a pretty serious, complicated thing to have happen to these animals. Now the good thing for this guy here is he had full recovery. They removed this fishing hook, and he was eventually released, so that's pretty exciting and pretty special. Now, the Cairns Turtle Rehabilitation Center gets to boast a 90% recovery rate. And we didn't make those numbers up. The reason we know that is because of this right here. So this is a satellite tag. It goes on every single sea turtle that's released, and it's really important that we put them on these animals so that we know that the treatment they are receiving is working, that these animals are surviving when they go back into the wild. And it also tells us really important information so we can prevent the animals from coming in the first place. It tells us where important nesting grounds are, where they feed, if they're interacting with shipping lanes and stuff. And knowing that information is so important so we can stop them from being injured, from being sick, and help protect their populations, because ultimately the Cairns Turtle Rehabilitation Center, we'd like for it not to exist. We'd like for it not to be needed. But it is. And satellite tags are so necessary to, the ultimate goal of this project. Now, again, I said thank you all for buying tickets and coming here. You guys all help pay for these in addition to grants and stuff like that. On the cheap end, we're talking $10,000. Like, they are expensive. But we're not going to get that data any other way, and it's imperative for the long-term conservation of these species. Now, I know I just spent quite a bit of time talking about some, pretty dark and heavy realities that sea turtles are facing. But the good thing is there's a lot that we are and can be doing to, care for and protect sea turtles. We talked about switching from, single-use plastics to cardboard and paper alternatives. That really makes a big difference. If you yourself like seafood, and I'll admit I like to eat seafood, something I really recommend is checking out this website called Good Fish, Bad Fish. You can look up your restaurant or maybe a certain brand of seafood you like, and you can see where that seafood is sourced, how it was caught. Because the reality is eating local food, catching it yourself, minimizing the risk of bycatch, things like that make a really big difference in protecting our oceans. Things like big fishing industries, like they use trawlers, which are boats that string out large nets behind them to collect fish. They collect fish indiscriminately. Maybe they're looking for one species, but the bycatch is 100 different other species. It's sea turtles, it's dolphins, and it has a huge negative impact on our environment. And so trying to reduce supporting those industries makes a really big difference long term. Doing things like using reef-safe sunscreen, I think, is also really important, and just reducing our use of trash and being ethical about how we exist in the environment makes a really big deal, as well as just sharing knowledge. What you learn here today, sharing with other people so that they know how their everyday actions impact sea turtles and the relationship we have between these animals and us. The other thing I'd like to point out or mention is the relationship between people who, for their careers, interact with the environment versus conservationists and stuff. I don't think that commercial fishermen are evil or the opponents in these conversations. I think there is a reality where we have an open dialogue and we share science with resource extraction, that there is an avenue forward for everyone. And a really great example of this can be found in the Mediterranean. There's this organization called Blue World Institute, which they research dolphins and sea turtles in the Mediterranean. And they partner with trawling fishing boats to work on ways to have both, an environmental focus as well as a resource extraction balance in the Mediterranean. And something they found is in trawling nets, which they catch sea turtles, and sometimes sea turtles will drown in them or will starve. Another big issue is when those sea turtles are caught in fishing nets, they're brought up very quickly, and then the fishermen who don't have a problem with sea turtles dump them back in the water. This will cause animals to get floater syndrome. So what they found is that if the fishermen hold on to those sea turtles, dry dock them on their boats for a couple hours, allow those animals to wake up and regulate themselves before returning to the water, those animals have a higher likelihood of surviving and not getting floater syndrome. And so it's just to this point where as we open up communication, we try to create connections rather than making this an us versus them conversation. It can ultimately benefit everyone and meet the objectives of conservationists. So again, I just want to say thank you, and I'm going to wrap up with just a brief little turtle release montage of sea turtles over the years. This sea turtle had a bite taken out of them by a tiger shark. So you notice all the sea turtles will have a satellite tag, and then you'll also notice that they've had like little fibropathocytosis. Coral here, she was very young when she was caught. I can't remember why she was in, but we'll just say she was very excited to be released.